Welcome everyone to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter and I am a curator in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. SIMS is a research and development institute focused around our manuscript collections, and we do a lot of digital projects, and we also do a lot of online outreach. So we have the SIMS online lecture series. We also have Coffee with a Codex. So every Thursday at noon Eastern Time, I hop on Zoom and bring out manuscript from our collection, sometimes a couple, and we just take 30 minutes to do a quick show and tell. Sometimes we have guests. So today we are at the CAJS Center, which is why I need an extension cord to check in my, plug in my computer. And Louis Meiselman, who is our cataloger, Judaica, I think of you as a Judaica cataloger. You have a longer title.
It's a little bit longer, Judaica, rare Judaica cataloger.
Rare Judaica cataloger. And so Louis, for regulars, you know, Louis comes every couple months and introduces us to something new that he's been cataloging. And so right now I'm going to turn it over to Louis, and he is going to tell us about this manuscript that we see right here.
Thank you, Dot. And I think it's always nice to be on the program, and I always enjoy showing some of our Judaica manuscripts with this program. Maybe some of you remember, you were there last time, that the last time I was with you, I shared an actual medieval Sephardic or Spanish manuscript which showed examples of the medieval Sephardic script, which eventually dispersed and became some of the most ubiquitous Hebrew script and type that existed over the forthcoming centuries. And I thought that this manuscript would be an interesting example of such script that is not medieval. It's actually early modern. So before I get ahead of myself, I will begin at the beginning. Now, this is a manuscript dated 1663, or more precisely in the Hebrew year 5423, which may have been 1662. Most of the months of that year were in the year 1663, but that is really the precise dating for Hebrew. When it doesn't have an actual day or month, it goes between two secular calendar years. The manuscript is bound in contemporary sheep, a green sheep binding. It has 4 raised bands from the original binding on the spine. I would say that the boards are contemporary. We don't know if they're original, but the bands appear to be original.
Can we just scoot it up a little to get it? There we go.
Now, this is a book of liturgy, or called a Mahzor, and it is completely written in manuscript. And the reason it is in manuscript, or possibly a reason, is what I'm going to mention now. Now, it was written in a more special place called the Papal States at the time, which today is part of Provence in southern France, more famously today as a vacation spot. But in those days, it was sort of a unique place in the Jewish context, in that the expulsion of the Jews in France happened at the end of the 14th century, and yet Jews were allowed to remain, or were brought back into the Papal States in the beginning of the 16th century. And these Jews were some people who had been expelled from Spain a little bit earlier in 1492. And they retained their unique customs, Spanish customs, and actually developed customs for each of the places that they lived. Most famous among these villages in Provence, well, today they're villages, and towns, is Carpentras And then there's the custom that we see in front of us today, which is called Lisil. I'm sorry, I don't have the best French pronunciation, or Leili. And today it has a longer name. It's on the Sorg River. Sorg. If somebody has a better way of pronouncing it, they could let me know. I'm sure there is. And there were two other places that are in this also, is Carpentras, Lisil, Avignon, which is a city, and sorry, the fourth place escapes me right now, but I will, if it comes to me, I'll mention it later. But one thing that happened with these communities is that while in the 17th century printing had already taken off and taken over a lot of ritual books like this one, in these places they still remain to be handwritten and written with the rubrics of much earlier manuscripts. So on that,
Before you turn the page, I have a question.
yes.
And that is that, and this is actually a question from Brian in the chat, that you can see the title page here and also here, but then here's the title page, and he's
Right.
asking how it's showing through. Is
Yes.
is it the ink?
I had a feeling somebody would mention that because it is like a very noticeable feature of the manuscript. This first page here is part of the gathering. I put it as part of the signatures when I cataloged it. However, it was originally a blank page. I would still consider it to be a blank page. And what you see on the mirror text is what we call bleeding, with the ink on this page is folio 2 recto. The ink is high in iron, and iron rusts, as you know, and it also can rust even if was a liquid like ink, and that creates what some people call it burn through, which is where it starts burning through paper.
So that's what that's doing there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I must say that usually burn through is pretty ugly. Some cases of it is almost horrendous, but in this case, I think it doesn't look terrible. It looks kind of interesting.
I think it helps that the text is in this shape,
Right.
this triangular shape, which is, there was another question about that in the chat of why it was shaped like this. And I've seen this in Hebrew manuscripts and also Arabic manuscripts like to
Right.
do that in a way that Latin doesn't really.
Yeah, I could get into that, but I just want to say one more thing about the burn through is that sometimes you see on manuscripts, especially more ephemeral manuscripts, which this is not, the writing gets lighter and lighter. And that can have something to do with the ink, the iron content in the ink, or the lack thereof. In this case, as you see, the ink is very, I would say, the ink is very precise and has survived extraordinarily well. It's 350 years old, more, and
But it looks really good.
it looks excellent. And the fact that there's a little burn through is probably like a sort of it is sort of just one of the consequences. So on that, I can talk about what we're looking at here.
There is
Yeah.
I hate to keep doing this before we go
course.
moving, but we have a French speaker who would like to pronounce the place name.
If you're okay with that, I
Would that be
happy to
cool?
hear it,
Would you
yeah.
like to unmute yourself? Sorry, I know that that's why I understand now why you were unmuting, but if you would unmute yourself now and say the phrase, that would be great.
Well, all right. L'île sur la Sorgue.
Thank you.
L'île sur la Sorgue is the
L'île-
name of the city, and it's lovely, and it's a Jewish destination for French people.
All right, so Île sur la Sorgue.
That's right.
Exactly. It's l'île, an island on the river Sorgue. L'île, like an île, l'île sur la Sorgue. It's a little island in the middle of the river with bridges on the banks. That's why the name has been given to that town. And
That-
it had a significant Jewish community in the Middle Ages and later.
Thank you so
Amazing.
much.
Thank you. That's delightful.
Now, are we
I-
going to music? What happened?
I must just say one thing is that at the time this manuscript was written, it was only called Lille. It was not called Sur la Sogue. That was added later to the name. I see that somebody is calling it calligraphy. I actually would not categorize this manuscript as calligraphy, but I do want to say more about the script. First of all, the text that you're looking at and what Dot had mentioned a moment ago is what we call a tapered column. That's the official term for what that is. There are a number of reasons why tapered columns are created. Most of those reasons are decorative. It looks very appealing. They also, I heard once that they can signify also possibly that you don't want to use every single spot on the page. You want to, you want to create sort of like more space and more width. But it definitely goes way back in terms of manuscript culture, and this specific prayer is the opening of the prayer of Kol Nidre, which is the most famous Yom Kippur prayer, so widely known. Even though the words Kol Nidre are on the following folio here.
Right. So it's a prayer book?
And that is as well in a tapered column, although harder to see because of that burn through that I mentioned.
Right.
This is the complete liturgy for Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and as you could see, this is a vocalized manuscript.
Mm-hmm. Someone was actually asking in the chat about the vocalizations, if it's in a different ink, because it looked like the vocalizations weren't getting the burn through.
Right. I think the reason that is because it just used less ink.
Less ink, because they're small.
But
Okay.
If I just go by the evidence, I would say that it was actually vocalized at the time of writing.
Mm-hmm.
There are some, I remember hearing once that there's some evidence that certain scribes would write an entire page or even series of pages and then vocalize those pages. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you what happened here, but the way based upon the evidence, it looks like it was vocalized pretty close to that time. The vocalizations, by the way, are also following certain Sephardic printed editions, which may have been present to help with certain words, even though this was 1663 was a little bit over 100 years before the Comte Venetian Rite of Carpentras was first printed for Yom Kippur, if I'm not mistaken. Half of their Mahzor was printed in 1738, and then the other half was printed, I believe, in 1766 to 7. And that was printed in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. It was a great center of Hebrew printing at the time.
Mm-hmm. Alice has a question about vowels, but no
cantillations.
Right.
Okay, so that's a good point. Cantillations are associated with the Bible. That's the Masoretic style of writing how these words are sung or read. It goes by, the cantillations signify both how to read something, how to understand the sequence and the composition of a biblical phrase. But it is true that over the centuries, the prayer of Kol Nidre, which has a very set tune, which is famous, although there have been many such tunes and many variants also. It has not been set in stone. It's not like that. Certain cantors would unofficially use cantillation on the Kol Nidre prayer. Then this one is not. But it was never, I don't think it was ever officially adopted as cantillations for the Kol Nidre prayer, although it was given as a sort of assistance.
Mm-hmm. Can you, sorry, one more.
Yeah.
We'll get further in the book, I promise. getting questions about this. It looks like the book has been trimmed, maybe, and
Yes.
then there's that, and I'm just curious what that is.
Yep, that is what we call a catchword. That is the same word.
Oh, that's a catchword. Oh,
as
okay.
that word
I know what a catchword is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe we'll even have Dot explain what a catchword is, but I just want to caution that this is why I said that the binding is contemporary and not original, because even if it looks old, even if it shows signs of being as old as the manuscript, it may have not been original. And this is one of the ways to tell, is that what we call what this catchword on the bottom is shaved or plowed through, and that was done to make the manuscript fit into a binding that otherwise would not fit. And although to someone hearing that today thinks that would be actually a horrible thing to do to a historic document, that wasn't always the case.
But it was a very normal thing to do. Yeah.
Unfortunately. So, Dot, if you want to just say what a catchword is.
Yeah. So well, this is kind of interesting because this is still just the second leaf of the manuscript.
That's right.
And so maybe that means that this is just a bifolio. I don't know. But a catchword is normally on the last page of a quire, which is a book is made up of lots of sheets folded together in little booklets that are then bound together. And sometimes you get catchwords where you put the first word of the next quire at the very end, like in the bottom corner of the previous quire. And it's to help the person doing the binding to make sure that the quires are in the right order. And it's helpful for us today because we can look at it, and if the catchword doesn't match what comes next, we know that something's missing or it's bound out of order. But seeing it in the middle of a quire that's not something that you see in Latin manuscripts, at least. So I know I've seen it in Arabic manuscripts, so it could also be something that you see in Hebrew manuscript traditions too. I'm just not sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is a catchword. Now, I do want to say something a little bit more about this rite. And by rite, I mean the rite of Carpentras and the rite of the Papal States. There is an integral rite of the Papal States, and then there was a specific rite of each one of these villages and towns. This specific book is the rite of this beautiful place called Lille, and that is to the contrary of neighboring Carpentras, neighboring Avignon, and all those had differing rites, and their manuscript traditions would be to actually advertise this is the rite of this place. And by rite, I should just say that what I mean is that not only were there certain differences in the actual prayers, but differences in the place that traditional prayers were put in the order that those prayers. So, for example, as you can see on a folio like this is what we call the Amida, or the standard recitation of liturgy. That is no different than any other, most Mahzorim, or especially Sephardic. So that would not be different according to all the rites. But here is what we call a piyut, or some medieval poem that was composed for the rite. And in this time in history, you would have something like the rite of Lille would say this poem between this and this other prayer at this time, while the rite of neighboring Avignon would say it at this other time. Or maybe certain stanzas one says, and certain stanzas another place says. Now, I just want to show, based upon what I just told you, one thing that I pulled up this morning, which is a note here from the scribe, saying that how this poem was written, who the author of the poem is, and then he writes in this note that one of the stanzas of this poem was not in our liturgy, so it was filled in at that stanzas of the poem. Again, the poem will go according to the alphabet; it's an acrostic. One was added in by a local person, and his name is Yosef, and then his last name is only half there because he just put an asterisk. But I can read that the word is like de Ponti something. So I still need to dig in and find where this person lived. Most of the Jews in the Papal States had what a little bit close to surnames based upon places. So somebody's last name is going to be Vinask. Again, my pronunciation is not the greatest. The scribe of this manuscript has such a case. His name is Delpuget, which is a place too, from what I understand. And these are the interesting things that you find in these papal manuscripts of Hebrew liturgy. One more word about where this whole genre of liturgical manuscript is that many were written over the few centuries where Jews had their specific existence in this place, in these historic communities. And across the world today of collections of Hebrew manuscripts, you will find subcollections of these kinds of books. And for example, you'll find some in Jerusalem at the National Library of Israel. You'll find some in Parma, in their collection, in the De Rossi collection. And often, maybe more so than in other manuscripts from other places, you'll find the same scribes. Sometimes you'll find a lineage of scribes, a father, a son, his son, and so on. And you can draw conclusions based upon all the different colophons you see and the different manuscripts you see, and so on. So that was just one thing I wanted to point out about the specific liturgy and rite of the Papal States.
Great.
So sounds like there's another question.
There's so many questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to let's see. So there's a question about the date. So is the date written in the manuscript? Is that how we know the date?
Yes. Let's go to that page.
Does it have a colophon?
Yes.
Okay. So it has a colophon, which how typical are colophons in these types of manuscripts?
Fairly typical, I
Okay.
would say. I must say that the prominent scribes from places like Carpentras or Lille, or in these small Provençal historic Jewish communities, clearly were familiar with traditions of manuscript writing, even if they were at this point centuries old, and they would write these kinds of these kinds of colophons. So, I think that I think that that part is fairly common with these types of manuscripts. But here you see his colophon, and if you could read it, you see that he doesn't tell you where he is. He just it's just telling you what his name is.
What
He
his
doesn't
name
tell
is,
you where he is.
and giving you the date or
Yes.
the year that he's finished. Yeah.
Yes.
Which are, because Brian is asking in the chat about, because European manuscripts, like Latin manuscripts, it's an exception to have a colophon in it, whereas in my experience, Arabic manuscripts do tend to have colophons that provide the name and the date, although they don't always. So sort of thinking about like the manuscript tradition and like who signs the manuscripts and who doesn't. I think that's that. So the next question is from Talia Fishman, who has a couple of questions about the printing. Are there other manuscripts that are printed in that location at this time? And if so, why is this one written? And she's also curious because of the careful, if we go back and look, like the text is laid out very carefully.
That's right.
And is this then an indication that it's been copied from a printed text or from a manuscript, or do we know? Is that?
Okay, well, thank you for your question. I think that I'll even go out on a limb and say that, in general, liturgical manuscripts are more careful than other kinds of manuscripts, such as responsa, letters, things like that. Liturgical manuscripts tend to be among the most careful and precise and good-looking manuscripts, So I would say it's not as surprising that it is laid out so carefully. And then we can get to the local practices. There was a local culture in Provence and in these villages of manuscript composition, and they did have a high standard of it if you compare it to other kinds. And aside from that, I think the fact is that they didn't have a printed liturgy at this time, from what I gather and from the research I've done. They only had a manuscript liturgy and a copying of manuscripts to other manuscripts, and so they tend to be of higher quality and of good completion, I should say. The reason I say that is because I find that once printing and got everywhere and became ubiquitous with the main text of the Mahzor or the Siddur, then manuscript sort of took a backseat and became more ephemeral and sort of became like my notes on something, possibly small variants, other kinds of archival documents about what you personally do. I see a lot of printed books that they bound in manuscript papers at the end, where they document, in my small town or community, I add this here, I take this out here, we also say this. So it's hard to find such a bulk of European handwritten Mahzorim that are of this kind of quality and this kind of type from this time. That's really what I see deals with this. And I think that if you look at another big collection of Provençal items like this at Hebrew Union College, I know they have a big collection. They might even have this scribe there. You'll see other examples where it does look almost like, in a way, like a medieval manuscript, because the manuscript culture was kept alive in this place.
All right. Keep going.
Okay. Now, on that word of the layout, a lot of thought has been given to the layout. Where you see pismon, that's 1 meter of a piyut, like I mentioned before, and it goes with the rhythm, structure, and meter of the poetry. For example, in this, it goes with the rhyming end of the substanza to create a full stanza by creating 2 facing lines and then a center line. That continues based upon the rhyme and meter to the end of this pismon, and it is like that. It is like that with almost all of the piyutim in this manuscript. That was something also that struck me when I worked on these, and we do have a whole number more of these manuscripts. Most of them are not as old as this one. They usually tend to date from the 18th century in our collection. But that did strike me was something that was kept careful attention to, was not to just compose the piyutim in just regular columns to read through, like a book or a novel.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually it's a careful composition, which seems to be ubiquitous across almost all of the Provençal liturgical manuscripts that I found.
Mm-hmm. So this layout is specific to Provence?
Very often.
Oh, interesting.
Very often, and it's not just Provence, but it's it's their understanding of this piyut, mm-hmm. and it adds to the readability of it, I would say,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because imagine, the meter is lost, the acrostic. This one happens to not be an acrostic, but excuse me, it is a aleph bet gimel dalet. Okay. But
so it's spelling something out down the
it's
side?
It's just the alphabet.
Oh, the alphabet. Oh, okay.
And a lot of piyutim are, but there have been cases of both where I've seen in the print, for example, in the printing culture, where the acrostic is sort of illustrated like this, and you can see the acrostic, you see the rhyme, you see the meter and stanza, and then or it is put into a column, and it just becomes a column, and you don't really see it unless you're aware of it from some other source from before.
Right.
So absolutely, that a lot of careful attention was given to the layout of this manuscript.
Cool. So we're almost to time. I think you have time for one more thing. Tell us one more thing about this manuscript before we go.
So I might be repeating myself, but I just wanted to bring out the similarities of the Sephardic script from centuries and centuries before that come to us all the way into the 19th century with the Provençal script. It is very hard to tell the difference between the Spanish script and this script if you look purely at the script. There are certain small differences, but what happened is that in places where Jews either had printing and manuscripts became ephemeral, or the manuscripts were continued, but they were, the script began to merge a little bit with something like Arabic, let's say, in North Africa, then the script starts to look more Arabic and cursive.
Mm-hmm.
While I find that Provence kept the Sephardic script, the pure Sephardic script, in a way that's very hard to duplicate, especially as something across communities. I do hope on a future Coffee with the Codex to show another manuscript we have from London, mm-hmm. which is like a very beautiful and old, antiquated example of the medieval Sephardic script.
We'll do it.
But I remember our former director, Will Knoll, I showed him this very manuscript, and I showed him an example of the medieval script, and he agreed with me that it looked so similar. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to tell aside from the codicological factors such as the paper binding and ink and so on. So.
Right, and the layout, I guess, of the text.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for showing this to us, and we will definitely have a look at that London, the manuscript from London next time.
Yes.
Couple months, so you all have that to look forward to. Thank you all for coming along with us as we took a quick look at this one. I did share the record with you, so if you want to see complete digital copy, it's there online. You can look at it in more detail. Thanks, everyone, and have a great week, and we'll see you again next week. Bye. Say bye.
Bye.